Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. It is time for your Friday recap, and I am joined here with Gavin. Joined by Gavin Purcell, aka Fonky Donk, to talk about everything that's happening in the world of Web3 these days. How you doing, Gavin?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, I realized something. I've been wearing this hat in almost every single recording that I do, and I feel like I'm gonna eventually get known just for this. I don't know if that's what I want.
Mustard?
I don't know if that's what I want or not. We'll have to find out.
More people listen to this show than watch it.
That's
true. That's your sell. In fact, they had no idea until you now just told them. So
well, now you gotta seek it out. Seek out the photos.
Go look on our YouTube page.
Yeah.
All right. I think we can dive basically right into today's episode. We're going to talk a lot about Worldcoin. I'm really interested to dive into that. Obviously, some quick hit news from our favorite projects, just from the projects in the space. But we're closing today's episode with a conversation that I had with Dan, one of the founders of GutterCat, and Alexander Bercow, who's on the creator partnerships team at OpenSea, to talk about the recent LaMelo Ball Puma GutterCat shoe drop. They basically did an NFT drop that is redeemable for this unique, for LaMelo Ball's most recent exclusive shoe drop with Puma, which I think is very cool. We're going to be talking about redeemables a little bit more throughout our content on the newsletter, on this podcast, because we've got overpriced gin coming very soon. And so I just wanted to explore this idea of redeemables. And interestingly enough, it's something that OpenSea has been really working on. And I know it's an area of focus for them, which I also find very interesting. They're a business that obviously has a lot of reason to try and figure out what's next for this space. And the fact that they are putting so much energy and attention into redeemables, I find notable. So anyway, wanted to get into this Puma GutterCat OpenSea collaboration and drop LaMelo Ball collaboration. So we talked about those two at the end of this podcast. So stick around for that for sure. With that, let's say a couple words. We had our event Tuesday night in Los Angeles. It was wonderful. We won't
really nice.
Our second to last event. It really was so nice. We talked to the Cool Cats team, so that episode will air next week. I think folks will really enjoy that. I really enjoyed the conversation. It flew by. The crowd was awesome as always. I really do just think Overpriced has one of the best audiences, has the best audience. Honestly, at this point in this space, it really is a special group of people. So thank you so much to everyone who came out. And it was the reveal of Overpriced gin. It was the first time I had personally seen had the physical bottle of the gin, of the overpriced gin. I've had the gin before, but not in the overpriced bottle. So you guys know that means we're getting so close to y'all being able to redeem these bottles. So it was really fun. Gavin's not drinking, so you didn't get to try the gin.
I did not drinking. I'm doing a year break. This is what happens when you get
year.
Yeah, I do this.
Months.
I do years on, years off. It's more off than on. I will say that lately. This is just what happens as you age, you change, you do little things. So yes, but I love gin, and I can't wait to try it in 2024.
Don't even give me that. That's so lame. Okay, you can confirm, however, that people were giving it good reviews. That people were really loving the cocktails.
Yes,
it was it really is. It's very good. So I'm excited for y'all to try it. Okay. We're going to get into all the good news stuff in just a moment, but we do need to hear a word from our amazing sponsors who make this show possible, so please go show them your support. Y'all know the phrase, not your keys, not your crypto. Well, in a world where too many people have had to learn that the hard way, Overpriced JPEGs is proud to partner with Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. Ledger's Nano S Plus and Nano X hardware wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, Ledger's own software for setting up your Nano device and managing your crypto assets, is the easiest way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control of your digital assets. You can use all your favorite dApps with Ledger Live, accessing 15 plus Web3 apps, including 1inch, Paraswap, Lido, and Zerion. So you can not only manage, but also grow your portfolio. And Ledger Live is available on mobile and desktop. Securing digital assets shouldn't be complicated. Ledger is as easy as it gets. Uncompromising security, effortless connectivity, full transparency, Ledger is your one-stop shop to trade and track crypto, grow your assets, and manage NFTs. Secure your future with Ledger. Visit shop.ledger.com today or check out the link in the show notes. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OpenSea, the world's leading NFT marketplace built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OpenSea user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OpenSea, you use OpenSea, but did you know that OpenSea now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OpenSea. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OpenSea right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. All right, let's start where we always do. Start with a little vibes check. You know, in the broader market, talks around recession maybe not being a thing. You've got, you know, the Fed did another 0.25 whatever basis point rate hike. It was sort of what was expected. 25 basis points, 0.25.
Yeah, 0.25. It's always confusing, right? It's
I know. I never know that.
0.25, so it's a quarter of a percent. So that's a 25%.
Right, 25 basis
yes,
points.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Anyway. Neither of us. I worked at a hedge fund, but it wasn't like
and
it was
I
for
was
like
a writer.
A year, and I was very young.
Writer, yeah.
And you were a writer. So anyway, it's sort of what was expected. But you were saying at the top of this, I mean, Jerome Powell sort of seeming to indicate.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think...
First time really saying it.
Yeah, and I think that there's a really interesting thing happening in the overall economic market right now, which is I think people were really expecting us to go into a pretty hard recession, but doesn't seem like we're going to get there. And it's a, you know, they always talk about soft landing and like they may have navigated it. You and I have talked about this before, but I think so much of what we've been dealing with over the last year, or even 2 years, including like the crazy run up in crypto and NFTs, in part was driven by COVID. And I think maybe we're finally starting to come back to like a sense of normal after like the huge run up and then the huge dip down. And maybe this is kind of getting back to where we need to be. I think the big thing just from a macroeconomic standpoint that's clear is that like, if you watch what like Google and Apple and all these big companies are coming back and they're having pretty good quarters and pretty good sales, and like that drives a lot of the macroeconomics. What the interesting thing I think about this for crypto, and one of the things that, you know, I spend a lot of time in Discords. One of the things I've been hearing quite a bit is it's a lot of people, not a lot of people are buying or selling NFTs right now, obviously, we know that. But there is a lot of people starting to talk about the idea of the bull run. Now, what that means and where it comes from and where we hit it, I don't know. But I think we are closer to what a crypto bull run, to the next crypto bull run, than further away at this point. So that feels good. I know we don't want to call the bottom again or try to find the bottom, but it does feel like we're maybe inching closer to something. The thing I keep telling people, and I have to remember this for myself because I get distracted by 1,000 things, is like, again, these are the times that like you got to stay in for the beginning of it, because at the beginning of it is where things are great, and that's the time you have to find.
You mean the beginning of the bull run? Yes. Yeah, I've been saying this now for the last several weeks. Like it sort of clicked for me, and like Lord knows I'll say this and then of course turn out to be wrong, but where like, you know, it does feel like obviously there's some positive news in the crypto world that'll start running at some point in the next 6 to 12 months. And then it's some number of months after that, once people have really solidified their crypto gains, that money and that profit starts running over into NFTs, which could mean that we're 24 months away from NFTs really feeling like there's anything popping again in a true way. It also could be less than that. So who knows, right? I don't think we want to put any immediate predictions on things, but I totally agree with you that I feel like there's a sense. Now, of course, there's like always a black swan event. You could have another banking crisis. Like you could have any number of things that could like drive us right back in. And as with anything of this size and scope, there's disagreement. I mean, you know, I listen to the All In podcast where they're debating this. You've got somebody like Sachs who still seems a little bit cynical about all this, thinks we're going to have a recession in Q4. I think the Druckenmiller is like some economist that keeps reporting we're still going to end up in a recession. So, I mean, you know, you never really know with these things, but definitely cautiously optimistic for now. Turning to the NFT world specifically, a couple of announcements from projects that I think it's worth talking about. Mythics launch. Yeah. Did you get a Mythics?
So, okay, I have had a Moonbird and 2 oddities. I had 2 Moonbirds. I sold one Moonbird a while ago, but I actually don't know what to do. I have one egg because I got one egg from the Mythic, and it's not a special one. It's whatever. It's a common one, but I don't know. I haven't looked at my Ledger wallet for a bit, so I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Can you tell me what I'm supposed to do?
I think so. Okay, so the way it's working generally, right? So you have eggs are airdropped to Moonbirds holders, and we'll get to that in a second. And then oddities holders have to actually go to the Moonbirds website, like create a little account if you don't already have one to verify that you have the moon, connect your wallet, etc. You make a little profile on there, which I actually didn't realize how intricate their website is. Like you can collect badges for going to proof events. Like they have a good little system there. I really hadn't keyed in on that previously. I have an oddity, which is why I went through all this. And then, so for oddity holders, you go and you basically like put your oddity in a raffle for burning.
Okay.
And what'll happen is that I'm now on a wait list, and I believe it's every day.
Oh, nice.
I think it's every day, but I don't know. I could have that cadence wrong. So maybe I'll check it here in just a second. But like in some regular cadence, they're taking 50 oddities or something off that wait list, who basically win the raffle to be burned and turned into a mythic. So I'm now waiting for my opportunity to be turned into a mythic. It may or may not happen. Obviously, I'm hoping it will happen. Burning my oddity for my mythic. The mythics are cute.
The art is amazing, by the way. What's fascinating to me about Proof and Moonbirds is when Moonbirds pixel art came out. I think part of the huge reason why it ran up is because the pixel art was really that good. Like it felt like the right kind of NFT for that kind of thing. And this is not pixel art, but it's the same sort of idea. Like they really crushed the art. Like it feels unique and cool. My only big question about this is, and this is going to sound insane in some ways, knowing where we come from in this world, but like, does it matter? Does art even matter anymore in a PFP? Like it does matter clearly in a generative art, but like, does it matter that it's great and that can that help them rise back in some form or another?
I think the sentiment's been positive because the art people actually like. My again vibes check of it is that there has been this positivity around this, and this also gives them a path. Not that I have any idea if they're actually looking to take it, to follow more of like a Pudgy's model now, because that's been the funny thing with Proof. Obviously, is when they made the decision to go art collective. I think plenty of people were supportive or whatever, but the overarching question has been like, what is the TAM for that, and how do you really create a super valuable community again on the back of that? Well, if we look now at like, what are the communities that are basically holding some level of value at this point? You've got, in some ways, DGods and Pudgies. I mean, Pudgies is still only in that kind of 4 ETH range relative, it's not the kind of 9-10 ETH of a DGods, but it did well off the back of the Comic-Con news, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. It's clearly a model that people feel like is working, and Luke is doing something right. And going this route gives them like IP and story in a different kind of way than they've had before, and they could start doing interesting things, like really trying to take a page out of that playbook.
I mean, one of the things I thought that was so interesting about that Cool Cats interview you did, which people will hear soon, is this idea that a lot of these projects are pivoting into storytelling and IP ownership and all that stuff. The hard part is, and I think you had to ask about this, is like, where does the value come back to the people when you're building story for the mainstream? Where does the value come back to the people that hold the token? And by the way, Pudgy's amazingly has gone up in these last couple of weeks. Like, I think it's like at 4.3 right now, floor price. And maybe there is a pathway to that. The other thing I was going to say is that with Moonbirds, I think you get with these mythics, there's a difference. They're not CC0, right? I think that was one of the big things.
I think you're right.
So there is like an ownership capability that you get out of these that you don't get out of Moonbirds. The bummer of this is always that, like, to me, the Moonbirds are much more iconic art no matter what. Like, that would have been a cool thing to hold on to. And I think it's funny. It was interesting drinking ape water at your event. And you're like, I looked at it and like, this is what it should feel like when you have like an NFT product in your hand, right?
We are going to talk about this. This is going to be before the last topic I want to get into on the show today is the Made by Apes launch. Like, that website has come live, and there's actually some interesting educational moments to be had around that. But yes, so we'll talk about sort of IP rights and apes in particular and what they're doing with Made by Apes, which I believe Ape Water is
part of that.
Taking part in it. I think I saw it on the website as one of the projects that was listed there. Yes, they have been great. They've donated water for the Overpriced Happy Hour tour, so very grateful to Ape Water for that, and it's been great. Yes, the how do you return value to the holders is definitely an open question. Luca has found a way to create the feeling that there's value there for folks, and also quite literally by, of course, doing the various licensing schemes that he has going on. I mean, I think there's a world in which people maybe overestimate what that can really lead you, and that fundamentally you're buying into the same game that anybody else is buying into with Pudgies, which is that you got to hope the IP becomes iconic enough that people want to own this like original collectible version of it.
Yeah.
But he's done a good job of sort of creating a narrative there that people are bought into for sure. And he's obviously very good at that. We started getting into this. So let's talk a little bit about Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. You had Pudgies there. Videos on social media of like very long lines of people at Comic-Con waiting for the Pudgies booth. Luca tweeted that they sold thousands of toys, thousands of Pudgy penguins at Comic-Con. They're physical toys. So that's great news. Yeah. And I think when you talk about the price pumping most recently, it was really off the back of all of that.
Yeah, I mean, Comic-Con is such an interesting thing, right? I've used to cover it. I've done a lot of television around it. Like, it is like a pop culture, like, kind of epicenter. And this year's slightly different because there's no actors there because of the strikes in Hollywood, which is a much bigger deal. So, when you go to this thing, it's really fascinating. You walk around, you see everybody dressed up in outfits and costumes, but then you come across these booths, and the booths are often people, toys, or I remember I went in the kind of mid 2000s, and it was like when vinyl toys were just starting, and you'd see like the Funko Pop booth, or you'd see like these kind of cool, like, the Kubrick bears and stuff like that everywhere. And it's a really great place to get exposure for something that isn't fully mainstream. And I think the interesting thing about this that we all have to remember in this space is that when an average Comic-Con person walks into Comic-Con, the only thing in their brain mostly that they think of with NFTs is like, oh, that's a scam, right? Like, that's what the average person is most likely thinking. This is just my take. I'm not saying I've interviewed 1,500 people and that's the average, but I would assume that's the majority of them.
Sure.
So, and even like this goes back to the Cool Cats interview we did. They mentioned this idea that people were coming up to their booth at Comic-Con and they didn't know what it was. They had no idea. They were just drawn in by the cats. And I think this is an opportunity to kind of onboard these people into just the art side of it, right? Like, it's this idea that you separate it entirely from the Web3 side. And it's this thing about like, how do you onboard people? But maybe when you onboard people, you're not onboarding with the idea that this is like NFTs and you can, make money or it's a valuable investment. You're just onboarding people into the idea that like, oh, cute penguins, cute cats.
Well, and this is what Cool Cat said. They said they didn't say they were an NFT company or an NFT project. They specifically said they were, I think, a digital IP company. Yeah. That's building games, and that's what their spiel was at Comic-Con, they said. And they're obviously not going to say otherwise, but they seem to think it was a great success for them and that they had a lot of people who were interested. I mean, in a funny moment in the interview, not to give it away, but I'm going to, I asked about their target demographics, and they were like, well, this was partly a discovery process to see who was most drawn to us. And they were like, it was really a lot of Asian women, which I was joking, like, that is probably the best demographic you could get as like a character brand, as like, absolutely, an IP brand in some ways. So, and not entirely surprising, honestly. I mean, again, I have to take their word for it, but I believe that. So yeah, I think it's cool to see these projects going there. The other thing you brought up was, and we had talked about it previously. I mentioned that this was happening, but Gary Vee and VeeFriends were at the National, it's the National something, but the National is is sort of the shorthand for it.
Card show.
Correct. It's the National trading card show, which was held in Vegas, and you were saying you had some commentary about it.
So Tropo Farmer, who's a friend of mine in the space and obviously a famous ape holder, mentioned the fact that, like, look, Gary Vee out here onboarding the masses in a real way at a place that a lot of people don't know NFTs. And like, there was a big VeeFriends booth, and I think his point was like the floor didn't move very much, but like he's doing the work, like that Gary's doing the work. And I think that's something that you're going to see a lot of people do in the next. They're already doing it. I mean, like Luca, Cool Cats, Gary, these are all people that are doing it, but I think you're going to see a lot more of it in the next 6 months, which is how do we bring people on board with what we've created and get outside of the Web3 bubble a little bit, right? Like, there's this idea that like we've kind of exhausted the Web3 bubble as to like how it can grow from here. So if there's a world where you can expand out into, I don't even want to call it Web 2, let's just call it humanity, right? Like, when you call it humanity and like, what are the things that appeal to humanity? How do you grow an IP out of that? And then you hope as a holder or somebody that's invested in the system financially that it trickles down. But to these companies, by the way, I will say this very honestly, like it might not matter that it trickles down. And this is like the tricky balance of the Web3 space, right? Like to them, what they're trying to do is get returns. They're trying to sell things. They're trying to make money. They're trying to build IP so they can make, TV shows or games. Ultimately, it's hard because like there's nothing in their bylaws as a corporation that says like you must keep the holders' value first.
10,000 random people on the internet happy with you.
Exactly.
Totally. Yeah, I mean it'll be the thing that plays out over the next 10, 20, literally decades of time, I think, honestly, for anybody who keeps building. I mean, that's Gary's whole thing, obviously, is like, I'm going to keep doing this for the next 50 years and I'm going to make this iconic IP, and then you're going to hold one of the early Mickey Mouses. That's not something you're going to see the return on even if he accomplishes that vision, right? You're not seeing that even necessarily in the next 10 years, which I think is not what most holders want to hear. Even myself as a holder, I'm like, when you really come face to face with that reality, you're like, like I said I understood that 2 years ago, but like, did I really understand that? Was I really prepared for that? But here we are. Okay, last thing before we get into what I would consider our main story tonight, which is the Worldcoin launch. CyberKongz has dropped, I think today, actually, it's out. It's Thursday, July 27th as we're recording this. Genkai, which is the next addition to the CyberKongz world. Just to give people the basics here, they are selling 9,000 NFTs. They're minting for 0.25 ETH. Obviously, they're endeavoring to sell 9,000. We can talk about whether we think that'll happen. And then you've got 7,000 additional NFTs, I believe, that are being airdropped to existing holders. So it's 2 NFTs, 2 of these Genkai for every like CyberKongz Genesis that you hold. One of these Genkais if you have a baby Kong. And then this is kind of a funny thing. It's one Genkai for if you're an active VX Kong holder. The VX Kongs, if I remember, like they're sort of the 3D modeled versions of the Kongs.
And there's a lot of them. I think there's quite a few of those.
So they have some sort of determination scheme, I guess, for like what qualifies you as active in that. And the active folks will get one, and that's for these 7,000 that are being airdropped. Okay, last thing. The thing that's interesting about this is for those 7,000 that are being airdropped, there is a 180-day like not entirely lock-up period. So what it is it's a vesting period. So if you sell immediately, and I don't know how this is working on a smart contract level, but that's a separate question, I suppose. If you sell before the first 180 days, there's a 0.25 charge to you, basically. You'll end up having to pay for it, essentially.
Wow, interesting.
And then over time, that'll get less and less.
Okay.
So in time, over that 180-day period, if you sell the amount, you'll be docked.
So they're not really free until 6 months from now.
What's funny about it is it's a different variation on exactly what Ether NFT did.
Right.
And I'm curious if they both seeded this idea around the same time or if they were inspired by Ether, because what Ether NFT did, if you remember, was if you were on the allow list, you could mint it for free.
Right.
But then you couldn't sell it for 10 weeks.
Right.
And it was like a full lockup. This is a variation on that, right? Which is it's getting airdropped to you. So you're not having to mint for free, but you are getting it airdropped for free. And then if you sell it, you'll be charged. So it's a similar concept, which I think, I like this. Let me put it this way. I like this, no question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how the holders maybe feel, but I think I like that there's a little bit of a novel approach to this in some capacity. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the Kongs guys have always been a pretty smart team. Like I have to say, Coco is somebody that I've admired in terms of like how he's supported the NFT ecosystem, but also like how he's worked within that system and all the people that work on Kongs. My big thing about this is I just think it's the wrong timing. Like I like Kongs as a project. I think that they've, survived through a lot of stuff. And, as we all know, Kongs was the, what many people think of as the absolute peak, which is the Yahoo News, the Yahoo News story about how much banana would make you per day. But I think that, we're now at a place where reading the room, it's hard for me to imagine that there are 9,000 people that are willing to mint a project that, and by the way, this is no shade against Kongs, I'm in a lot of projects that floors down too, but like floors down a lot on Kongs, right? Like this is like it's down far. And I think that it's hard for me to see a world where the public mint side of this is good. Now also, every project needs funds, right? And this is a way to raise money to keep the project going. And Kongs has done a lot of stuff. They have a really cool incubator. They've spun a couple projects out. Like they've done interesting things at Kongs. So I appreciate the project. I'm just not sure it's the right time.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I interviewed some of the team. I mean, again, way back in the day. I guess it was like early 2022, probably like January 2022. So like a year and a half ago. And something that Inverted said was, in terms of their like quote unquote marketing strategy, that what was the comparison he made? It was like Ford versus Lamborghini. I'm probably getting that right, but wrong. But like, point being, he was comparing them to a luxury car. And I think the exact comparison was actually in the context of Bored Apes.
Wow.
Where while Apes and Yuga were like, his point was they're very loud and out there and trying to get attention, and both the holders and in some ways like the team's strategy is built on that. And that was more like the Ford model. Again, please don't hold me to these exact specifics. Like they were the luxury car that was actually not marketing and trying to and was luxury by virtue of the fact that they weren't like the loud and markety kind. And it's so interesting because that certainly worked at the time, in part because of Banana. Now this was after that had already started to kind of collapse a little bit in terms of the prices and things. But it was still this like 100, 50 ETH floor, 100 ETH floor, whatever it was. I mean, it was the Genesis Kongz floor was still really, really high, much higher than the Ape floor at the time, if I remember correctly, or at least certainly higher. And so it felt like that worked, but I think over time, this is an attention space, and that strategy of being sort of quiet in the background doesn't work as well. Yeah. Now, with that being said, the Genesis Kongs have a 10, 11, 12 ETH floor. I mean, they're not, it's not as if this floor has
there's only
totally
1,000 of them.
By any means.
There's only 1,000 of them, and also I think they peaked at 125 at one point. So like they're down quite a bit, right? But also yes, they haven't collapsed. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, and even the babies, even the babies, I think are over one now. Let me see real quick before I.
And that's because they were always a strong community.
Exactly.
That 1,000 ETH thing. I mean, in some ways, what's coming to mind for me is like the Proof Collective, right? Like they almost were able to maintain this like thing that the Proof Collective initially was, which is like 1,000 people that feel like they're in this really like OG chat. It's the social club model. Yeah. It's like, I think a lot of people who are in Kongs, that was their first community. They were very early to this space. They're really true believers in a certain way. Yep. And the Kongs community is where they get to maintain that connection and relationship with those early true believers. This is me speculating. I've not been in that Discord in a long time, but that's certainly what it was. And I would be shocked if that isn't what it is now. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about. Web3Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Okay, let's get into our main story today, folks. The Worldcoin launch. This has been something that's been in the works for a long time. Folks, I'm assuming are sort of familiar with Worldcoin. It's a Sam Altman-backed project, really a Sam Altman incepted project that aims to be a global identity and financial system. Mm-hmm. Maybe I can give the overview here in a minute. Is there anything you think we should level set with on Worldcoin? I mean, there's so much we could talk about here.
Well, just a couple, two things. One, if anybody doesn't know, Sam Altman is also the person who is the leading, he's the CEO of OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT. So that's an important thing to know. And then second of all, this is something that
Big Andrew Yang supporter. Another important thing to know about Sam Altman. Big Andrew Yang supporter. The other big thing to know is this is not something that came out of blue, right? Like this is something that's been in the works for a while. I know when people see crypto coins pop up, they're like, oh, what is this BS? You know what I mean? Like this seems like it's something, this is something that's been planned for a bit. It is a large project that Sam has put a lot of time into. And when you think about Sam, he seems like a relatively serious person. I've done a fair amount of like
learning about him since OpenAI launched and OpenAI took over the world in some ways, but it's a real thing for him.
It's funny we're jumping the gun because my one of my closing questions of this segment was going to be, do you trust Sam Altman? Because I think a lot of frankly, a lot of things in the world right now hinge on whether or not you trust Sam Altman.
Yeah.
Like that is sort of the seminal question of our time. Is like he presents exceptionally well. In my opinion, you don't think so?
No, I was just thinking. There's another. Sam.
He made a face to everybody who's just listening.
There's another Sam that we all trusted very, very deeply, who didn't present as well. But anyway, sorry. No.
SBF definitely and never presented as well as Altman. I mean, he got away with sort of. People just assumed he was like this zany genius.
Yeah.
And Altman's been around for a really long time. So I always assume people know this because I feel like Altman's been in my purview for many, many years. I've talked about this before. We did a fundraiser actually at his house in San Francisco when Yang was running for president. So I worked with his team on that. But, he ran, at the time he was running Y Combinator. Yep. So that was, he ran the most prestigious VC, incubator, accelerator, whatever program in the world. And so has had a lot of experience with a lot of different entrepreneurs, been involved in the launch of a lot of big companies, and has the respect of a lot of different people, which is why I find him so interesting. Yep. Everyone from like a Kara Swisher, who is so skeptical of Sam Altman is almost the only person I can think of who I think I would describe her as like
she also likes Evan
world.
What's his name, the Snapchat guy, Evan Spiegel. Yes.
Yeah, but I think I agree, but I think there's also there's more criticism of him around like the way he structured the board.
Yeah,
like
sure.
he's one of these CEOs who has like basically doesn't have any checks on him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
He followed the Zuck model of like having like priority voting shares, and so he really doesn't have a board. So there is I think he's a charming guy, but I think she has docked him before for like, I think, or maybe I'm conflating her point of view with Scott Galloway's point of view. In any case, why does this question of like, do you trust Sam Altman even matter in this context? So, okay, I laid this groundwork. Worldcoin is endeavoring to be a global identity and financial system. It has a couple of different components. You have the coin component of this. You have World ID, which I don't believe is out yet, but that's this important part of this broader vision. And then you have this app. And so the idea is really just what it sounds like, maybe, which is the goal is to, any way you say this, it sounds kind of wild or maybe
dystopian.
Yeah, index all of humanity, right? Like verify. It's really about verifying humanness.
Yes,
verifying humans all over the world. I think it is very probably obvious to you and me why that's important.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing. I've had a couple of conversations now, even on this podcast, about what is the intersection going to be between crypto and AI, and how do these serve each other? And the answer you typically get when you ask that is, well, we're going to have to verify what's real in the future. As much as we frankly need it now, we're going to especially need it in a world of AI content and deep fakes and all of this. And crypto and the blockchain are going to be the way that we verify what's real. And my follow-up question has always been like, okay, like how? Who's doing this? Like, can you please give me an example of who's working on this? Because that sounds like great in theory, but I want to understand. Well, this is sort of the answer. Yeah. Sam Altman is working on this, it turns out, and has been working on this. And I think that's a huge goal of this, is to identify humans. The other layer of this is that financial layer. And I think part of the goal here, at least the stated goals from the Worldcoin team, which we should say is actually headed up by a guy named Alex Blania. So Sam seeded this original idea, but he is not like day to day running the team. This guy, Alex Blania, is running the team, and Sam's really there sort of in the background as needed. And part of the goal here too is, I hope I'm not putting any words in the mouth here. Like once you can identify people, once you have that sort of like, we can identify who's a real human, that's when you can start adding like a reputation layer to things globally. And reputation is the first step for things like loans, right? How do you get an under collateralized loan to somebody in the developing world? Well, one of the things would be if they had some sort of reputation. And this, of course, starts to freak people out because you start to get into like almost like a Chinese credit, social credit, or social,
it's like a Black Mirror episode, right?
Yeah, but they do that in China. You have this like social reputation system that can go very awry. Yeah. So I understanding why there's a lot of concern and whatever about this, and we haven't even gotten to the orb retina scanning side to this whole thing. I think just at a fundamental level, I do believe the world is going to move in this direction. Yep. Like we're going to need to verify that we are all humans. building a truly, really global financial system on the back of something like that, I find very interesting and compelling. So at the highest philosophical level, I think that everything they're trying to do is really interesting. Okay, so let's take a step back here for anybody who hasn't been following this. So, okay, you have to verify that you're a human. Well, how the hell do we do that? And there's a couple different ways you can do it. You could do some sort of KYC system. That, of course, is very limiting for a variety of reasons, and not the right. Certainly, nobody in crypto is going to argue that's the right solution. As in some sort of KYC, as in you like provide your government ID, and then it's the computer snaps a photo of you and verifies it with the government ID. But the real limiting factor there, if you're Worldcoin, is plenty of the world's global population doesn't have a government issued ID or is in a government that's in flux or whatever the case may be. And so that really doesn't work if your true goal is all 7 billion, whatever. How many people are on the planet?
More than that now. I think it's like
8 billion,
8.5, something
billion?
like that.
Whatever it is, right? If that's your goal here, a KYC system, like government ID system, of course, doesn't work at all. Then the other option they said that they were exploring, and the other option to all of this would be some sort of like reputation web, where you're somehow able to verify you're a human through enough reputation. That breaks my brain. They apparently see that as something that could be a part of this in the future. How you can really verify humans through reputation, all 8 billion of us, does not work in my own head, but I'm sure there's something I'm missing. And then the third way is biometrics, right? The third way you can verify a human is biometrics. They originally wanted to build this system through your palm. They wanted it to be like you verify through your palm. But it turns out, again, if you look at 8 billion people, palm and a lot of other things, including face scans, aren't necessarily like differentiatable enough between everybody to have this properly scale to 8 billion people and be reliable. So they landed on this. So apparently like one of the only things that really is distinguishable enough between all people that you could scale this out to 8 billion if you wanted to is the retinas. And this technology already exists for retina scanning. And so that is how they ended up with what they ended up with, which is there is this orb and it will scan your retina. And that is how it will verify that you are a human.
Yeah.
Now, what they will say is through zero knowledge proofs and through all these things, right? It's not keeping any of your information. It's simply signing, yes, this is a real human. Yes, this is a unique individual, right? This is not the same person that you've seen before. This isn't, again, so you can be Sybil resistant. You don't have like one entity creating a bunch of different fake profiles. Like, yes, this is a unique identified human being. And that's the information that gets shared with whatever the various parties on the other side are. So like in a world where Twitter wants to verify your humanness, right? You make a Twitter account and all that Worldcoin has recorded is, yes, this is a real human, and it sends that information out. Funny enough, this is actually how I originally got into crypto in 2021. I always say it was DeFi, which in some ways is true, but it was really verifiable credentials. Like I was really interested in verifiable credentials and this exact idea, right? The idea that you would have an ID that says, yes, you're over 21, you can go into this bar without having to give your birthday. You know, like what are the ways? So in some ways, this kind of stuff is like, the concept here is maximally privacy preserving, where what you're getting is kind of binary yes or no answers to things without actually having to store that identifiable data.
And is it using ZK? Is that the back end?
It absolutely incorporates ZK somewhere in this process.
Okay.
Were you to press me any deeper on like how all of this is working?
Know exactly where.
I mean, the coin is on the Optimism stack, but then they have something that's on ETH mainnet via Merkle trees. I mean, again, this is where you get just well beyond the limits of what I can really explain. But I think, and the other thing is that they're doing is they are trying to open source this. It's not all open source, so they're getting knocked for that. But like the idea is that it's actually the same thing as with OpenAI, which is like a slow rollout over time, open sourcing different pieces of this, claiming that over time they'll be able to open source nearly
kind of
all
OpenAI. Yeah, it's kind of open.
Yeah,
Some people would say closed AI.
Right. Well, that was OpenAI obviously was open and then they closed it, but they have open sourced some of it.
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah.
They've given lip service to the idea that they're going to open source more of it, which again brings us back to the theme of this section, which is how much do you trust Sam Altman?
Well, okay. The one interesting thing I think that also I've learned about this is, one of the reasons why they institute this, or one of the reasons they talk about it is UBI, right? Which is in UBI is something. So UBI is universal basic income. And as Carly knows, this is something that has been a big conversation point for many different politicians. Including, I think, Yang, right? That was a big part of.
Oh, that was his
Yang.
whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
He was like, that was what he was known for, right? It was like, and the free money guy, right?
Yeah. So why UBI? What is UBI? Why do we need UBI? Well, UBI is essentially a safety net for humanity, which sounds insane, but it's true. It's a safety net for humanity so that when AI, which I've now learned quite a bit about, when AI starts to kind of exponentially go up, which more than likely it will, and not to scare anybody, but like we are not that far away from a world where an AI is going to be as smart as a human and then might be much smarter than a human very quickly. And the world will probably get really good. Like in the best case scenario, or even in the kind of second and third best case scenarios, the world will be really good. But the money that is generated may not be generated in the same ways it used to be by normal people doing normal jobs. So they need to have some sort of income. And this is like, Sam Altman, this is like a step towards that, a way to kind of provide universal basic income. And it is truly universal because it's meant to be worldwide and not an individual government in some way.
I mean, the lengths of time I could spend talking about UBI, I feel like I've first of all truly read several books on UBI. That was why I originally joined Yang's campaign, was because I was actually a UBI advocate, having done research on the history of, in the United States, the welfare system here. But anyways, I won't go down that rabbit hole because I will truly never stop if I start going down that rabbit hole. But you're right, that's a huge part of this. Sam Altman is a really big proponent of universal basic income. That's why he loved Yang, to begin with, and so. That's part of this, is if you're able to, for a truly global UBI program to be able to exist, you need to be able to verify all humans.
Yeah.
And that's part of the thinking here as well. This is why part of the underpinnings of why you want to verify all humans on Earth is you can set up these kinds of programs. Yes, there's like the financial layer to this that's just like loans and reputation and all of that. And then it's also programs like a universal basic income. Okay. Last couple of things I want to say on this, and then we'll move on just on the coin itself, because what's launched is you have this coin. Also, you have these orbs. Orbs are in different places around the world. And so there's actually one, I think, very close to where I live. So I'm going to try and go and get
as well.
A scan. But you said, yeah, there's one near you too. But the market cap right now for the token is like 240 million or so. The coin launched, it's like 216. It's like $2.16 USD per coin. It's been fluctuating in that range in some ways since launch, I think.
Yep.
But the total supply, once at this price, I think it's like like undiluted or whatever it would be, like if you had all the coins released, it's like a $23 billion market cap, I think. So it's already quite big. I mean, you put Sam Altman's name behind anything and it's going to obviously do well. Yeah. I really like this though. Again, privacy concerns are the biggest thing. You see tons and tons of fears around privacy. They put out a ton of documentation. I'm not technically savvy enough to read that documentation and come to a conclusion myself. So it comes down for me on like trusting Sam and the team. I like Sam Altman a lot, I have to say. To answer my own question, I do, generally speaking, can trust Sam, to be honest. And so I'm getting my retina scanned. I mean, I don't have qualms about it, but I understand people's concerns.
Clear's got my retina already, so it's like my retina is cheap.
I know. That's what I was saying. I was just in LA. I use Clear every time I travel, so I'm like, this ship has sailed for me.
Exactly.
I'd rather be a verified human at this point. So, I mean, there's definitely dystopian future scenarios if you don't opt into this system. But if the entire future global world order starts to operate under this verified human thing, you have this very weird dichotomy that will get set up where you have these people who are just on the complete fringes of society and really can't participate because they refuse to sign in. I don't know. It gets weird. Okay, the last story I want to talk about before I turn it over to my conversation with Alexander from OpenSea and Dan from Guttercat Gang and talk about that Puma drop is the Made by Apes website went live. So we talked about this on the podcast previously, which is Apes had announced that Yuga had announced really that they wanted a better way to index and a directory for ape-based businesses to find each other. And I think the idea here for people is that they're trying to build almost like a business network and a business community for people and empower and give more access to folks who want to build businesses off the back of their apes. So this Made by Apes website is a way for you to get a license, to get your business off the ground, to network with other businesses, et cetera. I may be probably not using the exact language that they would use for all of that. The reason I want to talk about it is an interesting discrepancy was pointed out on Twitter, which is if you look at the language around the IP rights on the Made by Apes website, it does feel a little confounding when compared with the language used in the terms and service on the existing Yuga website. So I want to read these two out just to show what people have been highlighting. And let me say, I really do think this matters. If you're still in this space and you care about the future of this space from beyond from more than just gambling, this IP stuff is sort of the beating heart of some of it. And I'll say maybe
and
more
this is
about
a
it maybe
huge
in
part of
moment.
long-term value to you as a holder, conceivably, too, right? This is like part of why you hold things for this other than flipping.
And it's very thorny. So, okay,
Yes.
so let's read this. So, on the Made by Apes website, it says Yuga grants. Actually, let me start with this. I'll start with what it says in the terms and services on the Yuga website.
Okay.
In the terms and conditions, it says you own the NFT. Each Bored Ape is an NFT on the Ethereum blockchain. When you purchase an NFT, you own the underlying Bored Ape, the art, completely.
Okay.
Then if you go to the Made by Apes website that just went live.
Uh-oh, what am I going to hear?
It says Yuga grants NFT holders a broad license
Right.
to use the art associated with their BAYC and MAYC NFTs. All those rights are here. But that use license doesn't mean ownership.
Wow.
Note that in the previous thing, it literally said you own the underlying Bored Ape, the art completely. Here it says that use license doesn't mean ownership. Yuga retains ownership of all intellectual property rights in that art and any other materials Yuga creates, like names, logos, characters, etc.
Interesting.
Yeah, so people have been dunking on this. You know, the Yuga haters have been dunking really hard on this. I get it. I don't think that there's no merit to their dunking. What I do want to say, though, is that this is not a new issue, right? Like, people are, I think there are some people out there treating this like, oh my gosh, they've changed their terms and conditions. Like, this is Yuga, this is sort of like a Yuga rug in some way. Their original terms and conditions, their original, like, you know, contract has always been very sloppy. And
Right.
if you're interested in this issue, which I really, really think people should be who care about this in like this space in a bigger way, if I do say so myself, we did a really good episode with a bunch of intellectual property attorneys back 11 months ago, back in whatever that puts us at, I guess, June of 2022. We'll link to it in the show notes where we dive in on really a wide-ranging number of topics under the intellectual property category, but grounded specifically and primarily in talking about Bored Apes. We also talk about Moonbirds because around the time that Moonbirds did the CC0 decision, so we were like really talking through CC0.
Right.
But we talk about Bored Apes and what is allowed via Bored Apes, and it was around the Ryder Ripps lawsuit. So we really anchor it all in this specific conversation. I actually want to play a clip from that to kind of that'll be relevant to this conversation, where we talk about just how messy Yuga's language around this has always been.
What you're saying here is Bored Apes, the team has sort of spoken about this, like you have these full rights, but when you actually read the contract, we have the language here. It says commercial use subject to your continued compliance with these terms. Yuga Labs grants you an unlimited worldwide license to use, copy, and display the purchased art for the purpose of creating derivative works based upon the art. So that line, subject to your continued compliance, would suggest this is not like a complete you have them forever and always kind of a rights.
Let's make it even more confusing here for a moment, right? Those Bored Ape terms and conditions, the part that you just read, Carly, when you go 2 paragraphs up, it starts off with you own the NFT. Okay, so now I've got a document that it starts off by saying I own it. And then 2 paragraphs later says subject to my continued compliance. I'm not sure what exactly that is supposed to be. It has language that is suggestive of both a full assignment and a license.
So what that's just getting at, as you can tell, is just that this has always been this is not new. Yuga has not done something now that is like newly a problem.
Newly murky.
I think the truth is they never expected when they launched these 10,000 apes on the blockchain for this to become anything close to what it has become. And the truth is their original drafting was pretty sloppy.
Yeah.
I think the reality here, what's fairly clear now, given that they have much more probably legal power on all of this, is we should definitely yield to what is said on the Made by Apes website, which is what they assign to you when you buy an ape is a license to use that ape.
Right.
As opposed to they're not signing away just full ownership. And the last thing I'll say on this is like the analogy that I was given is like when you get married, as I am getting married soon, right? Your wedding photographer, if you have a good wedding photographer that you're paying a good sum of money, they will sign over all of the copyright for those photos to you. You own them completely outright. They are entirely yours. versus there's a world where maybe you pay a little bit less and the photographer could maintain that copyright, but just give you a license to obviously use it in any way you want because they're photos of you at your wedding. And that's the distinction we're trying to get clear on here. And the answer is that what apes have done is not, what you guys done is not to give you like full, complete ownership entirely of your ape and the art, but rather a license to fully use that ape in pretty much any way you see fit, commercially or otherwise. But this is where it gets funky because
this is where it gets funky.
Object to your compliance,
Yeah.
which leaves them that little sliver of room to, if you decided to make a porno with your apes, they could maybe do something about that.
Well, and think about just what happened with Twitter and X. Have you heard about this story that the guy there's a guy who had the X handle on Twitter. He was the one who had X. There was one guy, it wasn't Twitter, it wasn't Elon, but
and Elon took it away from him or
Elon took it away, right? He just took it away. And originally there was he was trying to get paid some money for it, which fair enough. This Elon didn't do a very good job of what this was going to be to kind of brand this and everything, but they just took it. And I think the interesting thing about this is always the difference between true ownership, which means I can do whatever I want with this thing. It's mine. It's in my house, and I can take it and do it and everything. And then this license. Now, that said, from a business perspective, this makes perfect sense. The other thing that gets super complicated about this always, and we've talked about this, I think, on the show before, is when an ape gets sold from one person to one person, right? Because then,
oh my God.
What happens if somebody's made a product with an ape and then it gets sold to somebody else? Does the new person do they have the rights to basically stop the other person from making the product? Like, all this stuff gets funky, and maybe this gives some of the power to Yuga to adjudicate some of that stuff. I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
I mean, if you are at all interested in this is not, I mean, you, Gavin, but anybody who's listening, absolutely. This is a 2-part series we did with these IP lawyers. We get into that quite a bit, especially in part 2, but like it's all over part 1 as well. Cause that was actually the original thing I was trying to dive into with this, is like, legally, how will this all work as this evolves? And it's still a pretty interesting conversation. I found part 1 I listened to, I re-listened to some of it in preparation here, and I was like, this is interesting. Like, I need a refresher on some of this. So we'll link to it in the show notes. I really do recommend folks go check it out if this is an area that you're at all interested in. Okay. With that, I want to turn it over to my conversation with Alexander Bercow and Dan from Guttercat Gang. The last thing I want to say to tee up this conversation, again, we're talking about the drop between Guttercat Gang, LaMelo Ball, and Puma on OpenSea. And this was, they had a fiat on-ramp. So they really built out a new product. OpenSea built out a new product to enable this drop, essentially. And we talk about that in this conversation. But I had a stat here that I thought was really interesting, which is that this was the highest conversion, or the highest percentage of mints coming from fiat payments that they've ever had.
Wow. That's a big deal.
Yeah, 15%, which isn't crazy, but they said the next highest one, I think, was like 8 or 9.
Yeah,
or
right.
14%, I think it was. Whatever. Point is, I'm getting these numbers probably slightly imprecise, so I apologize. Don't blame OpenSea for this, but it was like something like 14% of folks who participated in this drop did so via fiat. And they point to that, and they believe, and they were using this as evidence to say, like, what they found was there were outsiders coming in on this drop. Right. And SportsCenter actually featured this shoe. The shoe that you get by buying this NFT was on the SportsCenter Instagram as they were talking about LaMelo's latest shoe drop. So I do think this is getting some pickup in the outside world, and they seem to know or believe or whatever that there were a lot of sort of outsiders coming in on this, and they point to that fiat number as proof of that. So I think this is interesting. And again, I'm somebody who's very interested in redeemables,
Has a redeemable.
We'll talk about that more very soon, but also is a believer that redeemables is a really interesting use case for broader adoption to come in.
Me too.
So with all of that teed up, please enjoy this conversation with Alexander Bercow at OpenSea and Dan, co-founder of Guttercat Gang. Alexander, Dan, welcome to Overpriced JPEGs.
Thank you, Carly. Hello.
Hey, Carly. Thanks for having us.
So let's just start with the basics. I think Dan probably would love to have you give us the overview of what this partnership is, what this drop was, and really how it came to be.
Yeah, so, essentially, we've been working with Puma for a while now. It always, it just made sense. LaMelo, dropping his signature shoe. He was the first celebrity and athlete to join the gutter. He joined just 5 days after our mint in, June of 2021. And, I remember how, surreal it was for me. And, after he bought his cat, he hopped on Discord late that night and sent our very new, very early community into a frenzy. Again, this was June 2021, so it was electric. But in addition to that, we've been working with Puma for a while now. A couple months after we minted is when we connected, and we have done multiple activations with them. As I was telling you guys, I'm at the TBT tournament right now that they sponsor, and they gave us the slot for our team. And LaMelo is a Puma athlete, so all those stars were kind of aligned, and we started discussing different ideas pretty early on. LaMelo wore a custom pair of our gutter kicks during an NBA game last year, which had a gutter cat painted on both sides of the shoe. And as things progressed, we all decided a collaboration for his new MB3 signature shoes were the next move, and the GutterMelo was born.
It's been fun to watch the sneaker world during this time when so many things are flagging a bit. Like the sneaker companies are like keeping the excitement alive, I feel like, almost exclusively. So I want to talk about the other component of this partnership. Well, Puma's not here, but we've got OpenSea here. Obviously, Alexander's here with us. So how did this partnership come to be? I guess we'll start from the Puma Gutter Cat Gang side. Why did you decide to do this drop the way you did on OpenSea as really an OpenSea partner?
So we explored a lot of different avenues. After weighing out all options, OpenSea was the obvious choice. Can't say enough about Alex and the team. Just overall great people and a pleasure to work with. We were originally planning on hosting the drop on our own, but after we spoke with Alex and the OpenSea team, it was a pretty easy decision once they were also interested. They were the, in terms of helping us achieve our goals of maximum, visibility and a superior user experience. They delivered on that, and, they were a ton of fun to work with, and the same goes for Puma.
That's what I wanted to ask. Was like a tech stack thing? Is it a marketing thing? It sounds like it's a combination of all of it, which I guess I'll throw it to you, Alexander, before I even ask more broadly about why this partnership for you. Can you talk a little bit about the product side here? I think the landing page, like how strategically, how did you think through all of that? Because when I was looking at it, it felt a little bit different than a traditional maybe OpenSea shopping experience.
Yeah, this is a new product for us essentially, and so it ladders up into the question like, why did we want to work with these guys? We really believe in redeemables, as like what we call them, which can be digital to digital or digital to physical, as like an interesting and new use case. And to do that, we wanted to build a page that looks more and feels more like a traditional e-commerce experience, but we needed a great partner to sort of go to market with that. And so talking to these guys made a ton of sense, right? You have the incredible, community that is Gutter Cat Gang, paired with an incredible athlete like LaMelo, paired with, Puma. It was sort of a no-brainer to build this in tandem with these guys. And so it allowed people to buy multiple shoe sizes at once. And we support fiat. So it should feel more like a traditional experience for the consumer. And we hope that lowered the barrier for minters who'd be less familiar buying NFTs, which I actually think we saw happen. So it was really fun to do this with these guys.
So just to be clear, and you got to it there, but you land on this site and you see a range of, whatever.
Yeah. So when you went,
sizes. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. When you went to the page, you were able to actually pick, size 11, 12, whatever it was, and complete a checkout flow rather than just go and click mint and see what happens, the traditional quote NFT experience. And that was really important for us. I mean, that was also fairly difficult to do. There's a lot of underlying tech there, and it was possible because of OpenSea's Seaport protocol that allowed us to do those 1155, select experience.
And so is this being productized in some way that'll be able to be leveraged across are you guys becoming a more traditional e-commerce site?
I mean, I think it's something we really care about, right? I think we want to give creators the tools to build the kinds of experiences and products that they want. Everything that we do, we try to do with the idea of how can you build this for, a large audience, not just a singular creator. And so, I think you can sort of expect that we will do more things like this and open it up to more creators. But right now, there's still a lot to sort of work out to make that a reality for sure.
Mm. And final question on this thread, like, what is the excitement around redeemables from the OpenSea perspective? Is this a bet on this as a really big part of the future use case for NFT?
I think that's like probably a fair framing, right? Like, as NFTs mature and like as this market becomes more exciting, there's people doing cool new stuff, and I think we all agree that redemption via NFT is a cool way to do that, right? And for us, that's not just digital to physical, that's digital to digital, right? You burn an NFT to get another NFT or another digital collectible, but also physical. I mean, I just think it's a fun new way to experience those types of experiences. I mean, Carly, you have overpriced gin, right? That's same idea.
I completely agree. When we talked earlier, you used the Trojan horse analogy, and I think that's spot on. It's a very efficient way in onboarding newcomers. I love what Luca did with the Pudgy Penguins, and, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people follow that model. Obviously, that's something that we definitely considered going into the drop. But during the next crypto Web3 bull run, I think we will see a bunch of tokenized real world assets, which are physical goods, tied to NFTs for trading, a certificate of authenticity, etc. And it's definitely the next huge evolution in the space. We should be making NFTs cool for someone by linking it to a good they already value and deeply care about. And if it's easy to do, people will do it. And it kind of ties into what Alex was touching up on earlier about like just making everything easier. Like that's the name of the game for this, the next generation of Web3 incomers, because there will be another mass influx. And, they did a great job of making it very easy. I was surprised how many newcomers that we had who bought these shoes. Like I thought the numbers were wrong. So, on our end, we've been experimenting it. We were the first, DigiFizzy merch redeemable. But again, it's just the name of the game is redeemables and making everything super easy, for the Web 2 consumers,
I've been very interested in the redeemable idea for a year or more now. And obviously that's the route I wanted to go when I decided to launch the NFT, and felt like that component of it was really interesting. And now trying to understand like where we're at. So actually that leads me nicely into my next question for both of you, which is what have been the biggest learnings and or challenges you found through this process? Dan, for you, that could be anywhere from the inception of, I don't know how involved GCG was with LaMelo on the design process and everything else, but like from inception to now delivering shoes to people. I'd love to get each of your perspectives on what you learned and what's been a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are definitely quite a few, more early in the process for our side. It was definitely something we weren't used to with the variables of working. Like, we kind of knew that working with bigger companies, like, several multi-billion-dollar companies like OpenSea and Puma, and there was a couple others who entered the equation and went out of the equation throughout the whole year-plus process. But the one thing that was kind of interesting is working with an athlete. LaMelo got hurt at one point, which kind of changed things. And we were kind of like, wow, this is definitely a learning curve. So it was really cool to just experience it. Obviously, not that he got hurt. He's playing the best basketball of his career at that time. But it was all just, rolling with the punches. For our side, again, there were just a lot of moving pieces that we kind of understood with these bigger companies that took some time. OpenSea, again, all the companies were great. OpenSea never gave us any issues. They were very quick and very, always willing to make everything work.
You don't have to lie to me just because Alexander's here, Dan.
I know.
No, I mean it. He paid me off. No, but no.
You'll get the check in the mail, Dan.
Yeah, I already got it, man. I appreciate it. But no, honestly, though, we made it happen pretty fast. And, again, there are just so many moving pieces, so that was really kind of challenging as a small, lean team working with several multi-billion-dollar companies and an NBA superstar and just trying to make it all fit, So, but at the end of the day,
Totally.
I think everybody did a great job.
Alexander, for you, what were the big learnings and maybe challenges that you're discovering on the redeemable side of things? You've done a number of these. You mentioned digital to digital. You obviously did that with Crowd, with the Danny Cole drop. But you and I were just on a Twitter space the other day talking to the Mintage team, who's got their redeemable coming out. So y'all have been deep in this. Like, what are your takeaways starting? What are you starting to develop in terms of insights?
I mean, like, I think the challenges. We're building this new product in a big way, right? Like, I think Dan nailed it when, like, there's a lot of moving parts. I think that's true both on, like, the business side, right? You're talking to all these different parties and there's this NBA superstar and you're, like, threading this needle. But that's also true on the product side, right? Like, we hadn't built this type of stuff before. And we want, OpenSea, we hold ourselves to a very high standard. We want this product to be, world class and had to be ready on time for, these really important parties, right? And so I think those were fun but interesting challenges for us. Just like, can we even build this and do it on time and do it up to our standards? And then, like, more generally, it's every time we do a partnership, we also do like this postmortem idea, right, where we get back together and we say what went well and what didn't go well and what we can do better. And so every time we do something like this, it's with the intention of, like, let's improve this product, let's improve this experience, let's improve this handoff. And so, you mentioned Mintage, that's another thing that we've done. We took a lot of learnings from this to apply to that. And I think we'll continue to do things like that.
Can you give some specifics, whether it's on the product side or otherwise? Just what are some of the specific takeaways or learnings that you adapted from this to the Mintage experience? Well,
firstly, on this one, I think one of the things we learned was the amount of parties involved was very difficult. I don't know if there's like a quote learning in terms of, like, you can't, have less parties, but I think the way that you handle those situations and, like, how you, interact with them, I know that's, like, not the most specific, but I think it's like how I think about it is, just better, not to use a company buzzword, but like a DRI, right? Like a directly responsible individual, like having those people in the room so you can work faster when you have a lot of different parties like that was one takeaway. And on the product side, there was a lot that I think I don't want to put our team on how do I say this politically nice. We just want to continue to make the product much nicer, if that makes sense. Like, there was a couple things I think, where, like, engineers are on standby and there's a lot of behind the scenes magic that you don't feel or see that, to an earlier question, you said, do we want to productize this? Yeah, I think we do, but there's a lot of things we have to do to get there. And so those are a challenge too, is like, where do you draw the line on what's important for GutterMelo day one? What can be built later, and, like, how do you sort of bridge that gap in the meantime? Hopefully that's more specific.
Okay, it sounds like you don't want to speak to any specific challenges. I'm interested in this from an educational perspective. Obviously, not trying to draw out anything uncomfortable.
I unfortunately can't give how some of the magic is made.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, for folks who are interested, where should they go to check out the NFT and talk us through, just as we close here, just the logistics of the redemption window, getting this shoe, which I saw on SportsCenter Instagram. So it seems like it's getting some broader pickup, which is very cool.
Yeah, I mean, the SportsCenter post was amazing. The 13-year-old me was doing cartwheels. Was definitely really cool. Obviously they have a huge following, I think 50 million people. So it was a massive brand moment. Always loved that kind of stuff just because of how pumped up the community gets. And, a huge accomplishment for the Gutter brand and the entire NFT industry, if you want to, redeem, first off, if you're interested in the shoe and you haven't minted, you can go to OpenSea and purchase the shoe. And then you can redeem it on our website, guttermelo.com, or you can go to guttercatgang.com and follow the links. And the redemption period is open right now. It opened on July 18th and is open until August 20th at 3 p.m. So
What time zone?
Eastern. So 3 p.m. Eastern. So that's the if you're interested in the sneaker, that's where you'll find it.
Okay, great. Alexander, Dan, thank you both so much for joining me and talking about this. I'm sure we'll talk more about it. I know, Alexander, your team and my team have been talking about Redeemables quite a bit because we both have this shared interest. So appreciate you both being here so much.
Yeah,
thank you, Carly.
Of course.
A lot of fun.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.